Desk Updates, Coloured Wipes and Review. Firstly, we're going to look at the new functions on the desk. We have a clip with Edits, which is placed in the centre reel. And as before, we can use the inside arrows to move to each edit mark. If we go to the Full Frame menu as before, we can see all our edit marks. If we stop at a mark with a dissolve, we can change to a cut or wipe in the same way. A new feature in the wipe setup is the option to choose a coloured surround. Just by setting a value in here of 1, it's giving me the thinnest border of wipe. If we set these to 0 as well, they'll give us a hard edge. So you can see we have a wipe and we have a brown colour in the PAL box. PAL stands for palette, and by switching it on, we can swipe down and choose any colour we want. By placing it in the box to the right of the palette, we'll change the colour of the wipe. We can still change the edge size. By changing the outside number, the colour will dissolve off on the outside. By changing the inside number, and now putting 0 in the outside box, we'll have a fall-off colour in the inside. We're able to set the style we want. To get equal spill on either side, we have an equal number on either side. We also have a new function called Review. Review means to pre-roll and see the last effect we've made. The Review box can be set up in the Full Page menu through the Preferences menu. Here we can see we have a Review pre-roll of 2 seconds. It could be 1 second or whatever you choose to set it to. There is Review. If I press Review, we're now pre-rolling by 1 second and looking at that particular effect. Those are the updates in the Full Frame viewing menu of the Edit desk. Desk Updates. Folding Editor. As you can see, we have a clip in the centre reel with all our different edit points. Using button 2 on the rat, we can collapse down our whole reel. It's as if all relevant images are stacked behind each edit point. By grabbing hold of the middle section of the image and dragging across, you can see the clip line moving underneath. And we're able to view that segment. This is relative to each reel. Button 3 is going to collapse the third reel, and button 1 is going to collapse the first reel. In the Preferences menu, we can ask for Triple View. If that's switched on, when we go back to the desk and collapse the reel, it will have 2 additional small boxes. The first one represents the first frame in the edit, and the second box shows the last frame in the edit. To get rid of it, just tap on button 1 on the rat for the first reel, button 2 for the second, and button 3 for the third. If they're all open and we want to collapse all 3 reels down, use button 4. Button 4 controls all 3 reels together. ALF. 2-point tracking and edge effects. We can track in 1-point, 2-point and 4-point modes. Here's a clip of movement over a circuit board with some spark effects added. In order to achieve something like this spark travelling from one point to another, let's show you how easy it is to set up. Using 2-point track, let's take out a segment from the clip on which to apply the effect. We've got a single frame animation already set up, a traditional animation made on Paintbox, which we're going to use as the matte. In the paint system, we'll choose a bright colour to use as the matte fill. We have 34 frames, and therefore need 34 of these for the foreground and matte. We add the key to that section, so we're ready with the electric effect. Let's take this into ALF, which stands for Auto Lock Follow. You can see we have 1-point, 2-point and 4-point options. In this instance, we're going to use 2-point. Select the first level. This is very important. When we tap down, an image of the picture is shown, showing us what we want to track. We're going to choose that top left section. Just as before, we have the inner square, which sets up our target area, and the outer square shows the search area. We set those up as required, remembering to set the search area to a large number if there's a lot of camera shake or movement in the frame. Press the double arrows to process forward. We can see here it's now tracking forward and is firmly attached to that corner. We always see exactly what we're tracking all the way through the move. As soon as we get to the end, we're going to set up layer 2. Now up to layer 2 and choose the second track point. We can track in either direction on our clip bar. We can go back down or upwards depending on how we want to work. So now we're moving back down the line. We track each layer separately so we can go in and edit each point depending on what we may need to update. You can check that both points are quite secured, then take them into the blender. As soon as we get into the blender, we save those away. Save keyframes all in just the same way as when using 1-point. You can see there is our track, and here are all our keyframes on the bottom clip line. Now we're going to go back down to the desk. On the end of the pen will be our clip with a yellow box. That's our track information, which I could save in the library, or I could place on the desk. Pick up the spark effect and colour, put it over the top of the background, and take it all back into the blender. There you can see another new function. Our Hi-Con is automatically switched on. The first thing we do now is restore all the keyframes saved a moment ago. Now we can see our foreground on layer 2 has been offset. Next, move the picture axis, and we can resize and position the blue line. The first track point must coincide with the left point of the image. Then we can move back into axis 1, where all the keyframes are. You can see our axis is now at the first point we tracked. We spin it in the Z to allow us to attach the blue line on the right to the second track point. Some fine adjustments will be necessary to ensure that the size and position are correct. Now go to the keyframe and make sure Modify All is selected and switched on. Edit that point and then process it from there. We can see the track is working now. We go back into our texture menu and you can see that we have access to the filter, the blur for all our lens effects, and edge FX. These are the same effects which are in the paint box. Starting with outline, there we can see the outline and the color box is here. We have a surround of grey, a solid option where we can choose the depth in the number box next to it. We also have shadow, emboss, and decay. Decay creates a trail of colour in the direction you choose. Choose the colour and place it in the square box. The amount of decay is set in the percentage box. Once set up, go back to Effects and start to process again. We can see the track now processing through with our edge effect on it. Take the blend down to the desk. There we have the clip with edge FX and 2-point tracking. ALF. 4-point tracking. 4-point track deals with the movement in the X, Y and Z axes. To show this, we're going to use a car moving through the screen and track and replace the number plate on it. Take the car into ALF and this time choose the 4-point option. Make sure we start at level 1. We also need to set our points clockwise around the object. Again, we need to set up the target and search area. Then press the arrows to proceed forward. All the way through, you can see your pixel information in the X and Y box updating as you go. Now up to layer 2, and again we can process in either direction dependent on what we want to do. We can set keyframes all the way through if it's a complicated move, or we can just set in the first one to show the direction we're going to track in. Henry is taking a photo shot of the first image we gave it and looking for that pixel configuration throughout the whole track. Now up to layer 3. Choose a point and process again. If there was a huge lighting change in the clip, we'd use the Update button, which is just here. This allows us to constantly update the information we're searching for. So as the object changes in its luminance, we can keep a tight hold on the point we're tracking. Now we can track layer 4. Here are all the 4 points. If I move to level 2, you see that level 2 will become active with the target area. We can go to any point and update it if we want to. This is done by lifting that point and moving it to another space. Once we're happy with the track, take it to the blender, and there we can see all our keyframes with the movement of the car shown on the screen. Save all the keyframes away and go back down to the desk. There's the clip with the information which we'll place on the desk. This time we take the mat, place it on layer 2, and now take the pack into the blender. Immediately you'll see the key is set up here. What we do first of all is go into Pins and offset the pins to the edge of the mat. This is because we're only interested in the template and not in the surrounding image around the edge. As soon as we've got our pins offset to the corners, we restore the keyframes and you'll see the plate move back to fit the exact 4 points that we've tracked. We can now go into the Color menu to adjust the plate to integrate it with the background clip. Once that's set up, go into the Texture, where we can use the filter to increase the noise on layer 2, so the video fits perfectly with the film shot on layer 1. With all the effects on, we have a keyer working, a color correction, texture and tracking effects. Make sure Mod All is on, and then process the clip using the double arrows. Make sure you process it in Pin, as it's a 4-point track which works in the pin mode. Once that's finished, take the blend back down to the desk, and now you can see that the number plate has been replaced on the car and is moving perfectly with it. ALF, background minus track. This allows us to attach 2 moving clips to each other at a chosen point. Using these 2 clips, one has a completely different move from the other. Let's have a quick look at them. Here we have a G moving from the top left to the bottom right of frame. And on the left-hand reel, we have a Z moving from the top right over to the bottom left edge of frame. What we're going to do here is to use ALF in a slightly different way. We'll track one moving object and then the other moving object and attach them to each other about the points that we've tracked. Make a 2-layer pack and take it into the blender. Go to layer 1 and step through into ALF. Set up with the 1-point option and choose a point to track and then process. What we want to achieve here is to attach layer 2 to the point that we're tracking now on layer 1. To do this, we need to take layer 1, once it's tracked, and save the keyframes in Save Background, which is a temporary storage buffer. Switch on the Exit Without Effect button, and then return to the blender. This allows us to return to the blender without the track information. Go up to layer 2 and back to ALF. This time, we're going to track part of the G. Choose a point to track and press double arrows forward to process. As soon as this track is finished, we can use the background -track button. This allows us to take the track information from this G, subtract it from the track information that's already been saved in the temporary buffer. By highlighting background -track, we're able to execute that command. Return to the blender, and you'll notice that the letters have moved in the frame. Now, these 2 letters are attached at the 2 points that we've tracked. Let's set up a quick key up so we can see the results. We can now see the top of the G is attached to the top of the Z. Both are still moving with their independent motion through the clip. Go back down with the blend, and we'll have that combination as our final clip. ALF, Stabilise and Invert. This feature is situated in the ALF menu and allows us to stabilise and reposition our images. We'll take a clip with a lot of camera shake into the ALF menu and choose a point to track. By choosing the button as a central point, we'll be able to stabilise around the centre of the image. As soon as it's tracked, we'll save the track information in the temporary buffer for safety. Choose the frame that you want to stabilise from, and then highlight the Stabilise button. You'll see the edges moving in slightly as we stabilise around that button, but the clip has lost the shaky motion. Stabilise will stabilise the object about the point we tracked, but we'll lose the edges outside of the visual frame. In order to retain these, we'd have to take the clip back into the blender and resize or position the image. To show another example of Stabilise, let's take this clip of a bird into ALF. We'll track his eye with 1-point track. Once that's done, we'll save the track again in the temporary buffer. Now choose a frame to stabilise about. Here you can see the eye is pinned at that point, and the edges are clearly moving in. Take it back down to the desk, and we can check the image is steady by placing our pen on the eye again. Now let's take the same clip of the bird into ALF and restore those keyframes from the temporary buffer. There they all are. Now choose a frame and highlight the Invert effect box. Take that into the blender. If we process the clip at this point, we'll see the eye is really pinned to the background, and again we see our edges move in. Here's the difference. We can reposition and/or resize the picture immediately without having lost the outside edges. If we just stabilized it, the information outside of the visual frame would have been lost, and we'd have had to resize and reposition the image as a separate pass. Invert effect allows you to make all of these changes in one pass. Keyer enhancements. Garbage key. We're going to look at some of the new improvements to the Henry keyer, starting with the garbage key. Setting up in the left reel, we have our background, and in the center reel, the model shot against a blue screen, a typical blue screen setup. So we go to the top of that, take the left-hand one, place it over the top so we've got a background there and a foreground that we take into the blender. You can see immediately that we've got to remove the garbage on the left-hand side, which normally we would have to hand paint out or use a DVE move. But now we can just step straight into the keyer, turn garbage on, and we can set up a sequence to remove the garbage across the whole clip. We create a shape for the first keyframe, move to the end of the clip, and pull the edge of the shape across as close to the building as possible. Step back through the clip, inserting keyframes by updating the shape around the building. As soon as we're happy with the keyframes, hit the Make Key button, and you'll see a high-con matte being made. Back at the start of the clip, we can see that we've still got an area at the top to contend with. You're now able to repeat the same procedure, this time adding a new shaped matte to get rid of the remaining garbage. Hit Make Key again, and you'll see that the new shaped matte is added to the first matte. Both of these are one layer and are automatically attached to layer 2. So now the garbage is set up, I can step up to the Self key and tap on the blue screen as normal. Turn on Softness and increase to soften edges. We can save our setups at any time by highlighting the Save Setup button. Another new function is button 2 on the rat. If I click button 2 on the rat, I'll see a high-con of my matte, which shows the amount of building translucency. As soon as I'm happy with that, click button 2 again, and we see the full colour composite. Take that back down to the desk. The new pack with the information is placed in the left-hand reel. And if that's opened out, there is the key that's been set up. Take that back, straight into the blender, and you can see the key, which includes the garbage matte, is automatically switched on. Garbage interior. The garbage can be set up and used in different ways. Here we can see how to retrieve areas we've lost on our first garbage pass. Let's take the same 2 layers. There's our background, and there's our foreground. Let's go back into the blender and look at that garbage again. Turn on Garbage, and we can work on the whole clip. Let's repeat what we've just done before, pulling the shape across so that it's near the building and inserting keyframes when needed. As soon as we have that, hit Make Key. Now I want to go back, retrieve some of this, therefore whole clip must be off. Turn on Interior and draw a shape over the area to be retrieved. This will be our first keyframe. Move to the second keyframe and tap on the screen. The shape will reappear. The shape is manipulated by dragging corners or edges displayed on the screen. We've now retrieved the areas between those 2 points. It will start with that small shape and change to Keyframe 2. It's only going to create a mat over that small section. It doesn't exist at the start, and it doesn't exist on the other side. But in the middle, we've retrieved a section. Keyer Enhancements. Garbage Reverse. Reverse allows us to lose information around the shape. Pull those 2 clips into the blender, put on Garbage again, and Reverse. It will work exactly as the first setup. So again, if I put on Whole Clip, I'll see my box area there. Maybe just taking that angle in, this one out, and pulling the side in to replicate that particular shape. Closing down the area at the top and this side edge. So that's our first keyframe down to the end. We want to pull this whole section over, pull that slightly there, pull in this whole edge, something like that. Just tapping through to make sure again that our building is clear at all times. Don't forget we've got the blue screen to work with as well, but it's not a problem at all if we don't get too close to the building. So if we're happy with that setup, it's going to make an interior now with the reverse of the whole clip. And again, just tapping on the blue screen area to get the screen. Keyer Enhancements. Chroma key. Another option we have is the ability to use the Chroma key in order to create a high-con matte. In Layer 1, we have the background, and we also have a blue screen key of a cyclist flying through the air. Highlight the Add Key box and add it to Layer 1. Take Reel 1 into the blender and go to the keyer. Switch on Input key and Chroma key, move to the middle of the clip, and once in Remove, tap on the screen. You'll see the shape of the key appearing. Adjust softness to suit. Keyer Enhancements. Transparency and Curved key. We take a 2-layer pack into the blender. We've selected a frame where there's a great deal of fine detail. If Curved is switched off, you will notice the clip of the key alter. Go to Effects and enlarge Layer 2 to view the effect in detail. If we step back to the keyer and switch Curved back on again, you'll notice the key tightens around the subject. The Curved key gives us an S-shaped key. Without it, we have a linear key. Keyer Enhancements. Plus key. We're now able to blend down the keys of layers in a pack. In the left-hand reel, we have a background, and layers 2, 3 and 4 all have their relevant keys attached to them. If we take this pack into our blender, you can see the composite immediately, as all the keys are automatically switched on. Now we're on Layer 4. To check the key, tap button 2 on the rat, and we'll see the key. We can now work down through the layers, checking all the keys. Even at this late stage, we can still go back and update the key on any layer. Now our keys are working on all the levels. We just need to go down to Layer 1, which has no key, and switch it off. Then press the plus key button and process the clip. . When it's finished, take the blend to the desk. We can see the two layers that are present. The first layer is the background clip, and layer 2 is the new composite, which is a combination of the top 3 layers and their keys. If we take the top layer off and place it in the middle reel, we can see the color composite. We can also lift off the key signal and check it to ensure it's as we expect. Blur, lens effects and shadow. Here we have a look at motion blur and shadows. We're going to use this shot as our background, and for the foreground, a clip of blue screen with a cyclist jumping through the air. Take the 2 layers into the blender. The first thing we need to do is to go to the keyer. When we can see the cyclist, striking on the blue screen will create the key. We can see typical blue screen halo here surrounding the cyclist. To remove this, turn on the Spill button and use either Chroma Fix or Mix. Using Chroma Fix, pick up a sympathetic colour from the background and put it into the box on the right-hand side. For more detail, go into Effects and size up that area so we can see what we're dealing with. We now tap on a blue area with Chroma Fix in Remove, and you can see the colour in the box replacing the blue spill. If we take off the Effects flag and go back to the original size, then tap button 2, we can see the key that we have set up here. It's much softer than the self key we struck. They are 2 completely independent key setups. The softness here is 52 and acts as the secondary key to the self key set at a softness of 36. To create motion blur, we need to create an additional key, an additive one. This is done by moving down to layer 1 and turning that background layer off. We then highlight plus key and process the clip using the double arrows. This allows us to reproduce the cyclist on layer 2 over black. Then highlight blend and the input key in the keyer. Once the input key is on, we notice the additive key has been highlighted. Go to the Texture menu. Here we have access to the Filter, Edge FX and Blur. Turn on the Blur feature and move over to ensure Video, Matte, Luma, Chroma and Pick are all on or highlighted, as we want to affect all of these elements. By activating the Depth box, we can now control the amount of blur applied to the cyclist. The ASP box allows us to simply apply the blur in a horizontal or vertical direction. A positive number will give us horizontal blur, whilst a negative number gives vertical blur. We can still step back and change the overall depth of blur by altering the depth value. If you don't want something as simple as aspect, then move to the direction box. Choose your direction with the arrow symbols. If some feedback appears on the edge of the frame, use the individual crop boxes, top, bottom, left and right in this menu. We can activate these and crop the edge FX. Here you can see the blur across the screen. The Uni button, when set to 0, means that we have equal blur on either side of the object. If I move that to a positive number, you can see all the blur is moving off in the direction of the arrow, and there's very little on this outer edge. If I move that through to a negative number, you can see all the blur is moving off in the opposite direction to the arrow, and we have a much sharper edge on the right-hand side. Let's move that back to a positive number, because we're going to produce a motion blur effect. Lens allows us to affect the key. We want to bring some of the detail back on the cyclist, so we need to use this function. Balance adjusts the key signal. By changing the value in the box, we can bring back the information inside the key. If I take the balance to a negative value, the key will allow the background onto the foreground in the chosen direction, and hence the leading edges break down and we have a harder edge. In this instance, we want to set a value of 7, 7 in the balance box. The boxes K low and K high beneath lens and balance allow you to control the image plane. If K high is brought down in value towards K low, we're going to read just the lowlights. By setting these numbers further apart, we can interpret a wider range of values and therefore get a smoother trail effect. If we turn on the Self button, we're changing the key source to those of the luminance values within the cyclist. We're now able to pick on all low and highlights in the center of the subject and not just around the edge when using the key. If we change the K high values with Self highlighted, we can see similar effects as before. Let's turn off Self and adjust the overall depth. You can see we have a keyframe at this point. We're able to input keyframes with varying values throughout the whole clip so that we can achieve the desired look. Let's window in on this clip and just process 30 frames of it. Press the double arrows to process the effect. We can see the change of the motion blur increase as we pass the center keyframe. Even at this late stage, we can stop the clip and go down to the Effects menu and select Shadow. With this highlighted, we now have a 2D shadow available. If we move it across, we can see there's some picture blanking on the right. Step down to the secondary Effects menu and use the crops to eliminate this. Back to the Effects menu, where you can see we have position controls in X, Y and Z. In this case, we'll just reposition the shadow to the left. We're able to alter the transparency of the shadow and the softness, which will defocus the edge shape. The color box to the right allows us to select a color for the shadow. Once this is set up, we can then process the clip. Take it back to the desk, and we can now view the finished result. Keyframe editing facilities. New keyframe editing facilities have been added in the Effects menu. We have a clip on the left-hand reel with a few DVE moves stored on it. Take it into the blender where we can see the various keyframes. In Preview, we can check the move. We can move through the clip using the end arrows, allowing us to go to the various edit points. If we now go and turn keyframes on, we can see we have a whole array of new menus on the right. If we turn on Show, it will give us access to Pick Axis, Axis 1, Axis 2, Shadow and Shape. Shape covers the bend, wrap and turn functions. If we turn all off except Pick Axis, you can see its function is to allow selective displays of the keyframes on the clip bar. If we step to Axis 1 and turn off Pick Axis, we can now see all the keyframes present on Axis 1. We can step through and check the other axis. Let's move to the Curved menu. This allows us to change each of the keyframes in any axis we choose. We can now control the type of motion we want in that whole clip or between specific keyframes. For instance, if we switch on C, Axis 1, and then Do All the keyframes in that axis will now have a curve parameter about them. To change to a linear move, highlight the L, Axis 1 and Do All button. The P stands for Profile, and you can see that the stripy string shows the change of motion on the screen. We can go to any of the keyframes and change just that particular one. For instance, go to keyframe 3, highlight L and axis 1, and now we've updated that keyframe with a linear move. We can move to the next and change that to a profile move by going through the same sequence, and so on. You can see the stripy string has now changed to interpret the new motion through those keyframes. We can now preview that, and you can see how we've managed to control each of those keyframes using the curved menu. Let's move to Modify All, which allows us simply to update all keyframes on the axis chosen. Go to the top of the clip and alter the spin on the first keyframe. Switch on Modify All and edit it. The spin is now applied across the whole clip. Modify Forward. First, choose the point that we want to alter. Then, with Modify Forward switched on, make an edit. All points forward of that edit will now be updated. You can see from this new control panel that with Show On, we can select and view individual axes. With Curve, we can make adjustments to either the whole clip in either a linear, curved or profile manner by choosing one of those options, highlighting the axis and the Do All button. We can also change single keyframes by choosing the linear, profile or curved options, followed by highlighting just the axis you want to affect. Effects. Window Layer, Blend Down option. We're now able to choose a section of a clip and just process that part. Let's take a 2-layer pack with a duration of 50 frames in total into the blender. Once we're in the blender, go straight to the keyer and set up the key. We now want to process just the middle of the clip. The beginning and end were just there for our reference. To do this, choose the midpoint you wish to process from, and then switch on the W for Window. The number to the right-hand side of the W box is the amount of frames that are now visible on the clip bar, and also relates to the amount of frames that will be processed. 25 frames is all we need, so press the double arrows to process this. Take the blend down to the desk, and there you will see your new clip that will just have a 25 frame duration. In-Out menu. Feedback loop. This is used for sending vision to an external image processing device. All parameters are as before: recorder, player, VCR, copy, EDLs, etc. We have a new feature, FB. When highlighted, we get 4 menus. Machine source is placed in the first, duration of the clip in the second. The frame delay of the destination machine in the third, that is 2 or 3 frames. Finally, the execution delay is placed in the GPI advance box. Audio, A/B lock. This enables overlapping mono or stereo to be modified, and at the same time making it easier to crossfade or trim a split audio edit. Here we have 2 clips with audio on the desk, and we are going to place one over the other, making an edit in the middle. If we now view the clip and look at the audio menu, you'll see both tracks A and B are active. With A/B lock on, we can now touch on the track, and you can see a marker appear across both pairs. We can now slide in and pull a mix out of that edit point, affecting both pairs at once. They are now locked together. If we play it back, we can hear and see the crossfade up to the edit point.
That's life. A pillar of strength for the last 150.
Additive key. Now we're going to look at the additive key. We've got a full color background in the left-hand reel, and in the center reel, the black and white foreground. Take the foreground, place it over the background, making a pack of layers. Take that pack into the blender. Go to the keyer and switch on Additive, and you'll see the result immediately. Go into Effects and size up the overall image so we lose the garbage around the edges of the frames. We can see that by switching on Additive in the keyer, Henry automatically reads all luminance values and allows us to join layers 1 and 2. Add video. Add video actually adds the black and white values from the foreground to the background, and therefore you get a much brighter image. We have two pictures, taking them into the blender. On our first frame, we're looking at the number, and on the second frame, we've got a full color circuit board. Once in the keyer, go to Add Video and switch on, and you can see an effect immediately on the background, which is our picture of a drop. If we process it forward, you can see the Add Video effect on frame 2. There is the drop, and here we have our circuit board. You notice all of these colors here are much brighter because we're adding one video to the other.